Part 49. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 481. Chapter 481 Chapter 481 You are his favorite heir. Su Jiashan took back the woman's hand and said, "Let's go to the hospital with me to see my brother." Yes, there was a large red mark left on the woman where Su Jiashan pinched her just now. Hospital. Mo Zhongxiang still doesn't know what happened to Zhang Xiaoxi. He only knows about the content of yesterday's meeting. Zhang Xiaoxi handled it very well. Those shareholders have stabilized. As long as the shareholders stabilize, they can just wait for her to be discharged from the hospital. Su Yuan's, I will be discharged from the hospital tomorrow and go home to recuperate. Mo Zhongxiang thought that he could deal with the company's affairs when he went home, and it would not be as boring as in the hospital. Su Yuan's wiped her feet without even raising his eyelids. "I don't want to hear your request before the doctor allows you to leave the hospital." Mo Zhongxiang. Why should she bother to ask? She could just discuss it with the doctor secretly. Misstep, misstep. Su Yuan's helped her put on her socks and was about to pour out the warm water when the ward door was pushed open unreasonably. Su Jiashan entered the ward with the woman in his arms. When he saw the scene in front of him, he had contempt for Su Yuan's in his eyes. "Brother Zi, are our Su family in despair? Come to the hospital and work as a nurse." Su Yuan's half squinted his cold eyes, as if he didn't see him. He first went to the bathroom to pour out the water, and then sat on the edge of the hospital bed and called. 2 pieces of trash came into the ward and were thrown out. While he was on the phone, Su Jiashan found a place to sit down. His eyes fell on Mo Zhongxiang, and he curled his lips in greeting. "Momo, didn't Zeddy sell you? Why did he buy you back again?" Mo Zhongxiang frowned and retorted, "Second master, do you even care about my relationship with Master Zi now? I heard that a person who has been single for a long time will not be able to see the sweetness of others. Momo, your little mouth is still so unpleasant, but I like it, so why don't you come and fall into my arms? I promise to love you well." Su Jiashan blew a kiss to Mo Zhongxiang. Mo Zhongxiang wanted to reply, but his sight was blocked by Su Yuan's. He raised his eyes and stared at Su Jiashan coldly, and said in a cold voice, "You want me to throw you out, or go out by yourself?" "Brother Zi, if I hadn't come to see you, I wouldn't have known that you were working as a servant for a woman. You said that if I told the old man, he would be mad at you." Su Jiashan didn't care about his threat. Su Yuan's was not even in the mood to talk nonsense with him. He took out the wooden warehouse and pointed it at him. "It's your choice whether you want me to have one less opponent to leave now." Su Jiashan stood up and walked out of the ward. "Brother Zi, I'm just here to remind you. Don't forget the Su family's house rules. Be careful not to leave any bones left. By the way, if you marry this woman, the old man will do it if you are not satisfied. You got married privately without reporting it to the old man. Be careful that the old man comes to deal with her personally. After all, you are the old man's favorite heir, and he does not want his heir to have any weaknesses." After Su Jiashan finished speaking, he took the woman in his arms and left. When he went out, he saw that the men he had brought with him were all beaten with bruises and swollen faces. He felt extremely unhappy. A bunch of useless people. Subordinate. After Su Jiashan left, Mo Zhongxiang held Su Yuan's hand worriedly. "You'd better go back to Su's house first, he seems to be making moves." "Need not. I'm afraid of what he will say in front of the old man. You'd better go back to your home first and have a look." End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 482. Chapter 482 Chapter 482 Don't you know something happened to your sister? Mo Zhongxiang is not afraid of Su Jiashan, but she is very afraid of Mr. Su. The old man's breath is so heavy that it makes people scared. Maybe it is because there is too much blood on his hands. Just as Su Jiashan said, if Mr. Su takes action, Su Yuan's he couldn't protect her. She didn't want Su Yuan's to be hostile to Mr. Su. Are you worried about me? Su Yuan's touched her cheek, his cold eyes full of tenderness. Mo Zhangxiang was not pretentious and admitted immediately, I'm just worried about you, so you'd better go back and have a look. Su Jiashan won't come to Rongcheng for no reason. When you are discharged from the hospital, I will go back to my home for a visit. There is no need to worry about the old man. He knows you and agrees with you, Su Yuan's reassured her. Mo Jiangxiang's pupils trembled slightly. He told Grandpa Su and asked him to accept her. When did he wait for things to happen? How did he get Grandpa Su to agree? You didn't agree to something unreasonable to Master Su request. Su Yuan scraped the tip of her nose lovingly, no. No, Mo Zhangxiang didn't believe that Mr. Su was a very talkative person. Thinking about his past life, Su Yuan said he wanted to be with her. The old man had someone hunt her down, but it was Mr. Fu who later settled the matter. Now she is actually like this, I easily agree, this is a lie. Don't believe me, Su Yuan's pinched her nose. Of course I don't believe it. Mo Zhangxiang was still talking when the phone rang. It was a shareholder who supported her. Uncle Ji, is there something wrong with the company? Zhangxiang, can you contact your sister? Behind Jixia were the dozen shareholders who had the meeting yesterday. Mo Jiangxiang's eyelids suddenly twitched. Uncle Ji, what's wrong? Zhangxiang, it's like this. We heard that the car your sister and Mr. Fu were riding exploded last night, and we want to know whether it is true or not. Jixia's ears stood up, afraid of missing any news. Mo Jiangxiang's black pupils trembled immediately, and the blood all over his body froze. Why didn't she receive any news about Zhang Xiaoxiu's accident with Fu Jianxiu? She forced herself to calm down and talk to Jixia. Uncle Ji, I just told you my sister talked on the phone. Is your news wrong? Are you sure? Jixia asked uncertainly, or he didn't quite believe her. Yes, I'm sure. Mo Zhangxiang pretended to be calm. Jixia felt relieved after receiving her affirmative answer. Zhangxiang, if you are free today, you should ask your sister to come to the company. Okay, Uncle Ji. Mo Zhangxiang hung up the phone. Then she immediately called Jiangxi. The phone rang for a long time but no one answered. Mo Jiangxiang's heart suddenly became tense and blood flowed all over her body. Just when she was about to make the second call, she was picked up and said, Sister. When Mo Zhangxiang heard her soft voice, his heart relaxed on the spot, and a wave of warmth came out of his eyes. His voice trembled, Child, where are you now? I'm in Ruchin, Zhang Xiaoxiao said in a panic. You were telling me once, where are you? Mo Zhangxiang asked again. Zhang Xiao pursed his lips and felt a little entangled in his heart. I'm in the hospital, the same hospital you live in. Mo Zhangxiang immediately stood up from the hospital bed, holding the phone and asking, which floor and room number is which? Zhang Xiaoxiao told her which floor and room she was on, and a few minutes later Mo Zhangxiang appeared in her ward panting. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 483. Chapter 483. Chapter 483 has inexplicable hostility. Zhang Xiaoxiao looked at her and grinned. Sister, you are here. Mo Zhangxiang looked at her pale face, his heart ached in pain, and his voice couldn't help but grow louder. Why didn't you tell me that you were injured? I'm fine, don't worry. Zhang Xiao walked to her side and held her arm. Mo Zhangxiang looked around her whole body with his eyes and saw that there was nothing serious about her except that her face was a little paler and her face looked a little better. It's okay. You have to call me too. I'm your sister. Why don't you tell me if you have anything? Am I not afraid that you will be worried? Zhang Xiao said coquettishly. Mo Zhangxiang gave her a sharp look. I heard from other people that you were injured and I was even more worried. Well, my fault, I will tell you immediately next time, sister, please don't be angry. Zhang Xiao shook her shoulders and apologized. Do you want another time? Mo Zhangxiang stared at her. Zhang Xiao stuck out his tongue. There will be no next time, sister, don't be angry. Where is Fu Chenxiu? Mo Zhangxiang asked. Zhang Xiao lowered his eyelids, his face looked very bad, his mood was very depressed, and his voice was very low. Uncle Wu, he is injured, and he is still lying in intensive care. He was injured because he was trying to save me. Mo Zhangxiang frowned. Fu Chenxiu was injured. You can imagine how serious the explosion last night was. If it didn't make the news, Fu Chenxiu's people might have suppressed it. Who did it? Mo Zhangxiang asked. Zhou Yuling. Zhang Xiao had a look of hatred in his eyes for the first time when he mentioned Zhou Yuling. Mo Zhangxiang really didn't expect that it would be Zhou Yuling, nor did he expect that Zhou Yuling would be so crazy and wanted to blow up Zhang Xiao. In the previous life, Zhou Yuling treated her as a love rival and always caused trouble for her, but she was not so crazy yet. In this life, Xiao living, so some things have changed. Zhou Yuling had to deal with Zhang Xiaoxi. Has he been caught? Mo Zhangxiang asked again. Zhang Xiao heard the news from An Nangxuan. The person hasn't been caught yet, but Uncle Yi went to catch him. I believe he will be caught soon. With An Nangxuan and the others protecting her, Mo Zhangxiang was no longer so worried. If Zhang Xiao was unprotected, she would ask Su Yuans to protect Zhang Xiao. You're staying in the hospital, don't wander around, you know, Mo Zhangxiang told her. Well, I won't wander around. I still have to take care of my fifth uncle here, and Uncle An and the others won't let me wander around. Sister, don't worry. Zhang Xiao imitated Bai Yueguang's tone and said. Mo Zhangxiang stayed with Zhang Xiao in the ward for a long time. At noon, he asked Zhang Xiao to change his clothes and talk to a few shareholders before leaving Zhang Xiao's ward to change his dressing. Back in his ward, Mo Zhangxiang stared at Su Yuans and asked with a straight face, did you know that you were injured when you were young? No. Mo Zhangxiang took a deep breath to calm down his anger. Do you know why you didn't tell me? I'm fine. Let me tell you, you're just worried. There's no need. Su Yuans only had Mo Zhangxiang in his heart, and no one else's affairs had anything to do with him. Su Yuans, Zhang Xiao is not someone else. She is my sister, as you know, her affairs are also my affairs, so you have to tell me anything about her in the future. You know, Mo Zhangxiang had a headache. Su Yuans, he has an inexplicable hostility towards Zhangxi. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 484. Chapter 484. Chapter 484. Wouldn't it be better for you to learn to accept her? Su Yuans gave a perfunctory hum. Mo Zhangxiang had a headache seeing his perfunctory attitude. Su Yuans, can you stop being so hostile to me and learn to accept her? Su Yuan's face darkened, and the corners of his eyes turned blood red. He looked at Mo Zhangxiang. Why should he learn to accept Zhang Xiao? She took Mo Zhangxiang's life, and he held her in his previous life, with that stiff body, with that cold body. He wished he could kill Zhang Xiaoxi, but he knew that if he killed Zhang Xiaoxi, she would hate him. But he couldn't accept the fact of loss, so he left with her. Fortunately, this time, he came back. If the same thing happened in the previous life, he would kill Zhang Xiaoxi in advance, even with Fu Chen to protect him. He also wants her body to be destroyed. The only thing he cared about was Mo Zhangxiang, and he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. Su Yuan's fierce eyes made Mo Zhangxiang pull at the corner of his clothes in fear. Every time he showed such an expression, it was a sign that he wanted to kill someone. He wanted to kill Zhang Xiaoxiao. This knowledge was not very good, Su Yuan's. Mo Zhangxiang's soft voice made Su Yuan's put away his fierce eyes, and his voice was cold and without warmth. Yeah. Mo Zhangxiang. Forget it, she shouldn't force him. Do you know that it was Zhou Yuling who attacked Xiao Xiao? Mo Zhangxiang knew that Fujianxiao's people were looking for Zhou Yuling, but she still wanted Su Yuan's to be in the search, which would make her lose money faster. Yi Chang's translation channels may not be as good as Su Yuan's. I don't know, Su Yuan's answered simply. Mo Zhangxiang. I won't investigate. Su Yuan's finished his sentence before Mo Zhangxiang could speak. Mo Zhangxiang. I just asked the doctor and said you can be discharged from the hospital. We will be discharged later and go home to recover. I have called Jing Zhang over and he will check you. While Su Yuan's was speaking, he had already packed his luggage. Holding the discharge certificate in his hand, Mo Zhangxiang was completely dumbfounded. He was the one who refused to let himself out of the hospital in the morning. His current change was simply faster than a woman's change of face. Su Yuan's, I think I need to stay in the hospital for a few days. The wound is a bit painful. Mo Zhangxiang acted exaggeratedly. She knew why Su Yuan's was anxious to let her go. It was because he didn't want her to get along with Zhang Xiaoxiao. Su Yuan's raised his eyebrows and stared at Mo Zhangxiang. Momo, your acting is too poor. The car is outside. Come back with me and I will help you protect your sister. Mo Zhangxiang covered the wound with one hand, and for a moment he didn't know whether he should continue acting or not. After all, he had put forward the conditions. Su Yuan's knows Mo Zhangxiang's character very well. If you don't offer her some tempting conditions, she will never leave. This girl's lifeline is so easy to grasp. Sure enough, after a while, Mo Zhangxiang stopped covering the wound and said with a smile, my wound doesn't seem to hurt so much anymore. I can go home to recover. Well, come here. Su Yuan's waved to Mo Zhangxiang and walked over. As soon as he passed by, he jumped into the air and was held in someone's arms. Mo Zhangxiang hugged his neck and stared at him. You promised me that you would send someone to protect my sister. I don't want to hear the news that she was injured. When Mo Zhangxiang heard the affirmative answer, he nestled in his arms. He would definitely do what Su Yuan's promised. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 485. Chapter 485. Chapter 485. Helping relatives but not taking care of others. Mo Zhangxiang was taken back to the villa by Su Yuan's. Su Yuan's allowed her to deal with some work matters, but there was a time limit, which could not exceed 2 hours a day. At the hospital, Yi Changji went to see Zhang Shi first. When he arrived at the hospital. When I was young, Uncle Yi would definitely catch that woman Zhou Yuling if her car hit the sea. Uncle Yi would also find her body and crush her bones into ashes. Zhang Xiaoxiao sat on the hospital bed and looked at the emotional Yi Changji, knowing that he was promising himself that Zhou Yuling would be caught again. Uncle Yi, if Zhou Yuling's car enters the sea, there is little chance of finding her body. You no need to waste manpower. Yi Changji also knew that it was not easy to fish out a person in the vast sea, but he couldn't feel at ease without seeing the body. He had been hanging out on the road for too long, so he had to be careful and vigilant to follow him, otherwise he would have been killed long ago. Never give the enemy a chance to hurt you. To deal with the enemy is to see the person alive and the body to die. Child, what Uncle Yi lacks the most is people. People who hurt you are Uncle Yi's enemies. You don't need to be polite when treating enemies. Yi Changji felt sorry for Zhang Xiao. He was not as good at comforting people as Zhao Huiyan, so there was only so much he could do. He only helped Zhang Xiaoxiao deal with people, so when Zhang Xiaoxiao was young, He often did things to threaten elementary school students, but so what, he just wanted to let people know that Zhang Xiaoxiao was protected. Not even Baiyu Egwang could feel Yi Changji's protective attitude when she was young, but her preference for helping relatives but not taking care of others made her feel warm in her heart. It also made her envious of Baiyu Egwang. "Uncle Yi, you are so kind." Yi Changji grinned, showing his big white teeth. "Who is the best, Uncle Yi or you, Uncle An, Uncle Zhao, or Uncle Guan?" "Zhang Shi." "Don't worry, I won't tell them three." The look on Yi Changji's face that wanted to hear the answer made Zhang Xiaoxi's eyes twitch a few times. There was a scene in Baiyu Egwang's memory where the four of them asked her to choose who she liked the most. At that time, she chose Zhao Huiyan because of him. He helped himself get the autograph of the idol of the most popular TV series at that time. From Baiyu Egwang's memory, she could feel the resentment in the expressions of the other three men. Not to mention that An Nangsuan is sitting there now. "Uncle Yi, I'm a little sleepy." Zhang Xiaoxi didn't want to answer this kind of death question, so he chose to be sleepy. "Are you feeling uncomfortable? I'll call a doctor for you. This miscarriage is not." "Chang Yi, you are too busy, hurry up and catch that girl." Zhou Yuling and Nangsuan suddenly stood up from the sofa, frowning and yelling at Yi Chang Yi. Yi Changji also knew that he had said the wrong thing, so he shut his mouth and looked at Zhang Xiaoxi. Zhang Xiaoxi, who was chatting and laughing with him just now, at this time, the corners of his eyes were moist, his face turned pale, and his eyes had changed. Sluggish. This expression almost scared Yi Changji to tears. He slapped his mouth with his hand and said, "When I was young, Uncle Yi was wrong. Don't scare Uncle Yi. Uncle Yi is timid and can't help being scared. Uncle Yi, it's my fault. I didn't protect the children with my fifth uncle. It's all my fault." Zhang Xiaoxiao said as 2 lines of tears streaked down his face. And Nangsuan wanted to give Yi Changji a slap in the face. Knowing that he had low emotional intelligence, he specifically told him not to mention the child in front of Zhang Xiaoxiao when he came, but he completely ignored him. "When I'm young, would you like to go with Uncle An to see your fifth uncle? Your fifth uncle will be transferred to the general ward today." And Nangsuan tried to divert her attention. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 486. Chapter 486. Chapter 486. The hour is not so good. Zhang Xiaoxiao wiped the tears on his cheeks with his hands, but still looked at An Nangsuan blankly. "Fifth uncle." And Nangsuan followed what Guanyang told him. Whenever Zhang Xiao found something wrong, he could tell her about Fujian Xiu. This would divert her attention and prevent her from falling into a dead end. If she did, she would be in trouble. "Sir, do you want to go with Uncle An?" And Nangsuan asked again. Yi Changji on the side looked extremely nervous. He closed his mouth tightly, fearing that he would say the wrong thing again if he mumbled. But looking at Zhang Xiaoxiao's still dull eyes, he became nervous. Zhang Xiao was stunned for a while and then nodded. "I want to go." "Uncle An, let me push you." And Nangsuan pushed the wheelchair next to Zhang Xiaoxi and helped her sit on it. Yi Changji followed them like an abandoned dog. In the ward not far from Zhang Shishi, Guanyang had just transferred Fujian Xiu to the general ward when someone's dark eyes opened and his voice was hoarse. "When Shishi?" "It's okay. She's in the ward not far from you. Do you want to see her now?" Fujian Xiu nodded. Guanyang hesitated for a while, thought about it, and was ready to tell him, "Boss, I was actually not very good when I was young." Fujian Xiu's deep eyes stared at Guanyang. Guanyang glanced at Fujian Xiu's heartbeat, which was within the normal range. Compared with making Zhang Xiao go crazy, Fujian Xiu's mental endurance was stronger. He pursed his thin lips and said, "Boss, the child is gone." Fu Chenxiao's eyes turned scarlet instantly, and his voice was hoarse, "I'm protecting her, why don't I have a child?" Guanyang glanced at the abnormal heartbeat next to him and frowned, "Boss, it's best not to show your current behavior in front of me." Fu Chenxiao's long eyebrows knitted together, and his black eyes stared at him motionlessly. "The child is gone, plus you were injured and your mental state was not very good when you were young. If you are accidentally stimulated, you may go crazy, so don't mention the child in front of her." After Guanyang finished speaking, the man on the hospital bed suddenly struggled to get up. Guanyang pushed him back, "Boss, do you want to go back to intensive care for 2 days? I'm going to see you." Fu Chenxiao's eyes were bloodshot, and his handsome face was cold and tense, completely ignoring the injuries on his body. 11 She is very good, boss. The most important thing for you now is to recover from your injuries. Only if you can comfort Xiao Xiao can he be able to get out of trouble. Fu Chenxiao was Zhang Xiao's only comfort, and Guanyang knew this. Fu Chenxiao knew that his child was heartbroken, but he felt even more sorry for Zhang Xiaoxi. It was because he failed to protect her. He could have countless children, but Zhang Xiaoxiao only had one. "Have you caught Zhou Yuling?" Fu Chenxiao asked. "Not yet. The Changyi said that the car and the person fell into the sea, and he is still asking people to salvage him. The person should still be in our ward now. Zhou Yuling's company, let the second brother take it away," Fu Chenxiao said coldly. "The company is now in the hands of Mo Ziyuan. This matter is very simple. Zhou Yuling has also been played by that old fox Mo Ziyuan. Do you want to send Mo Ziyuan in now?" Guanyang said the key point. Fu Chenxiao narrowed his eyes and said, "Call the second son here." Before Guanyang left the ward, the door was opened, and an Nangxuan pushed Zhang Xiaoxi, followed by Yi Changji. "Uncle Guan, is fifth uncle awake?" Zhang Xiaoxiao looked at Guanyang and asked expectantly. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 487. Chapter 487. Chapter 487. Pampering and Helplessness. Guanyang made way for Zhang Xiaoxi. Zhang Xiaoxiao looked at the hospital bed and opened his eyes. The man who was looking at him couldn't help but burst into tears. "Fifth uncle." And Nangxuan and the others voluntarily exited the ward, leaving space for the two of them. As soon as the three men went out, Yi Changji was beaten hard, and a Nangxuan slapped him on the head. "I told you to talk too much and told you not to mention the child in front of the child. You forgot all about it, net." "I was wrong." Yi Changji was willing to be beaten. It was true that he had no control over his mouth just now. And Nangxuan stopped beating after a few times. He sat on the seat outside, lit a cigarette for himself, and looked at Guanyang. "Were you going to find me just now?" "Well, the boss asked you to take over Zhou Yuling's company." Guanyang conveyed Fu Chenxiao's words to him. "Yeah," and Nangxuan responded, looking at the two people not far away. He put out the cigarette in his hand and walked over there. "Chen Baiking, does it really matter if you don't go back? The company's affairs still need to be handled by others, right?" Chu Hanyu asked Chen Baiking. Chen Baiking rubbed her furry head. "If my company goes bankrupt, I wonder if the daughter of the Chu family will be willing to support me." Chu Hanyu. "If I leave the company for 2 days and the company cannot run, then the company will also face layoffs. It's okay. I'll be here with you. Otherwise, I won't worry about leaving you here alone." Chen Baiking looked at them getting closer and closer from the corner of his eyes. "A close figure. What are you worried about? This level is surrounded by Uncle An and the others." Chu Hanyu answered him seriously before he understood what he meant. Confused. "Ah." Before Chu Hanyu understood the meaning of his words, and Nangxuan occupied the space between her and Chen Baiking. "You have sent Niuniu to her." You can go back, and Nangsuan issued an eviction order without any politeness. Chen Baiking raised her lips and smiled, I'm sending my fiancé, and I don't need you to tell me what to do, Uncle An. And Nangsuan's blood pressure suddenly rose, and he was angry. Now, except for Grandma, everyone in the Chu family agreed that Chen Baiking and Chu Hanyu were together. They had already exchanged tokens, but there was no press conference to announce it. The reason why it was not announced is simply because Chu Hanyu had just terminated his engagement with him and immediately announced it again. This would bring bad reputation to Chu Hanyu. And this man, who was only a few years younger than him, called him Uncle An, but he almost spit out his old blood, I don't have a nephew as old as you. Uncle An, since Niu Niu calls her the same way, I will naturally follow her call, whether you like it or not. Chen Baiking always had a slight smile on his lips. Chu Hanyu listened to the two people's bickering and rolled his eyes speechlessly. Chen Baiking, where is my candy? Chen Baiking took out a candy from his bag and handed it to her, and gently warned, the last one today, otherwise your teeth will hurt. Yet Chu Hanyu held sugar in his mouth, and the bitter taste in his heart dissipated a lot. Sure enough, the sweet taste could cover up the bitter taste. And Nangsuan watched the exchange between the two, and the crease between his eyebrows deepened. When did the relationship between the two become so close? Chen Baiking, why are you still standing here when you leave? Chu Hanyu walked in front with candy in his mouth. There is a saying on the internet that people who like you will always have the things you like ready. Even if they know that eating too much of some things is not good, they will still have them ready despite being pampered and helpless. Please give me 2 monthly passes, woo woo woo. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 488. Chapter 488. Chapter 488. Don't cry. Uncle An, Niuniu is calling me, please make way. Chen Baiking looked at An Nangsuan with a smile. An Nangsuan. Chen Baiking, hurry up, Chu Hanyu urged him again. Chen Baiking crossed An Nangsuan and followed Chu Hanyu's footsteps. An Nangsuan looked at the two figures walking side by side with dark eyes. Second brother, is this Niuniu with Chen Baiking? When did that girl Niuniu decide not to follow you? Yi Changji came over and said. And Nangsuan glanced over with a cold look, Chen Baiking can't do it? Translated by Yi Chang. Second brother, Chen Baiking is the best among these bastards, why can't he do it? Yi Changji was a short-circuit person and didn't pay attention to An Nangsuan's face at all. And Nangsuan glanced at him coldly and couldn't help but leave. When passing by Guanyang, he gritted his molars and said, go and check Chang Yi's brain. Guanyang pushed up the frame on the bridge of his nose, Chen Baiking is good, he has Niuniu in his eyes. And Nangsuan said angrily, check yourself when you have time. Guanyang. Xiao Yang Yang, the second brother must be feeling unbalanced. In the past, that girl Niuniu followed him, but now she doesn't follow him, so he became angry. Yi Changji whispered in Guanyang's ear. How would you be happy if it were you who took the flowers away with the soil in them? Guanyang said metaphorically. Translated by Yi Chang. What the old man Chang Yi said makes sense, you should eat more walnuts. Translated by Yi Chang. Zhang Xiao walked into Fu Chenxiu step by step in the ward. He couldn't stop the tears in his eyes, and his vision was blurred by the tears. Uncle Wu, Wu, Uncle Wu. Zhang Xiao was sobbing hard, so he went over to hold his hand and asked, Uncle Wu, does it hurt? Fu Chenxiu's slender fingers held Zhang Xiao's cold fingers, and his voice was gentle, don't cry. Woo woo woo. Fifth uncle, if you hadn't been protecting me, you wouldn't have been injured so seriously. If you hadn't come to Rongcheng, you wouldn't have suffered this. It's me who Zhou Yuling wants to deal with, and I'm the one she wants to kill. It doesn't matter to you, Uncle Wu, but you did it because of me, Zhang Xiao said, sobbing and blaming himself. Fu Chenxiu squeezed her hand hard, with a serious expression on his face, "When you were young, you were mine. It was my responsibility to protect you and protect you. Uncle Wu, you have no responsibility to protect me. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I don't want to. Uncle Wu, your life is more important than mine. She is a lonely soul. It doesn't matter if she dies, but Fu Jianxiu must live." Fu Jianxiu pursed his thin lips into a straight line and frowned deeply. He stared at the crying woman with dark eyes and said coldly, "You are my life. Without you, my fifth uncle would be a lone ghost." Fifth uncle. Zhang Xiao didn't know what to say and could only keep crying. "Don't cry." Fu Jianxiu wiped her cheek with his fingertips and brushed away her tears. Zhang Xiao felt extremely guilty. She shouldn't have come here in Bai Yueguang's place, so that she could protect the child and prevent the child from being lost. Fifth uncle. Don't cry. The wound on Uncle Wu's back will hurt even more when you cry. Fu Jianxiu saw her crying so sadly that his heart ached. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 489. Chapter 489. Chapter 489. Uncle Wu is very selfish. As soon as Zhang Xiao heard what he said, he immediately became nervous and at a loss. "Uncle Wu, does it hurt? I'll call Uncle Guan for you." Zhang Xiao was about to press the emergency button in a panic. Fu Jianxiu grabbed her hand, looked at her and comforted her, "No need to call Guan Yang, as long as you don't cry, it won't hurt." Woo 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 woo. Fu Jianxiu just watched her cry and waited for her to calm down a little before speaking, "Are you still crying?" Zhang Xiao shook his head, although tears were still welling up in his eyes. He bit his lip and controlled his emotions. "Uncle Wu, I have something to tell you." "Yes." Fu Jianxiu looked at her calmly. Zhang Xiao was in a state of torment inside. She didn't want to hide it from Fu Jianxiu. She wanted to wait until Fu Jianxiu was well before telling Fu Jianxiu that the child was gone. But now she felt extremely guilty whenever she saw Fu Jianxiu. The longer she kept it secret, the more she felt depressed. Like a huge mountain, I couldn't breathe or gasp, my voice was hoarse from crying. "Uncle Wu, I have something to tell you." Uncle Wu, the child, is gone, I'm sorry." When Zhang Xiao finished saying this, his face was as pale as paper, and the corners of his whitened lips were already bleeding from her sharp teeth, and his eyelids were drooped. He didn't dare to look at Fu Jianxiu, his hands were clasped together nervously, and his joints were turning white. Fu Jianxiu looked at Zhang Xiao, and his heart ached. How much more would this silly girl have to endure? A child was far less important than her, so what if there was no child? "Look at me." Zhang Xiao's thick eyelashes trembled slightly, and her little body trembled slightly. Fu Jianxiu stretched out his hand to pull the person over and put him in his arms. His voice was gentle and he said, "When you are young, look at me." Zhang Xiao buried his head in Fu Jianxiu's arms and kept saying, "Uncle Wu, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Fu Jianxiu's eyes were scarlet, and his heart was throbbing. Every word Zhang Shi said made him feel uncomfortable. "Xiao Shi, look at me, look at me." Fu Jianxiu forced Zhang Xiaoxi's face with his hands and forced him to look at himself. "Xiaoxia, look at Uncle Wu, it's not your fault that the child is gone, do you understand? It's my fault, Uncle Wu, I'm sorry." Zhang Xiao struggled not to look at Fu Jianxiu, he was scared. Seeing her excitement, Fu Jianxiu covered her lips with his thin lips and kissed her gently. Zhang Xiao's warm tears fell on his skin, leaving only the sound of whimpering. A few minutes later, Fu Jianxiu just let go of Zhang Shishi, held her cheek, and stared at her affectionately with cold eyes. Xiao Xiao, it was Uncle Wu who didn't protect you, so I don't blame you if the child is gone. Even if it's the fault, it's Uncle Wu's fault. No, you are wrong. Uncle Wu, you obviously protect me very well, very well. If Uncle Wu protects you well, then the child will still be there and has nothing to do with you. You are punishing Uncle Wu now, do you know? Fu Jianxiu kissed her forehead. Zhang Xiao shook his head crazily. Uncle Wu, I don't blame you, I don't blame you. It has nothing to do with you. The child was in my belly, and it's my fault that he's gone. When I was young, Uncle Wu was very selfish. He was so selfish that as long as you were fine, if he had known that a child would cause you such pain, Uncle Wu would not have let him come into this world from the beginning. Fu Jianxiu held an emotional ginger hours. End of this chapter. After wearing the book, I became the group favorite. Author, Little Ginger. Chapter 490. Chapter 490. Chapter 490. I don't support her anymore. Zhang Xiao was speechless and looked at Fu Jianxiu with wet eyes. When I was young, this child will come back. You believe Uncle Wu, he will like us as parents. I am just keeping him with the angel temporarily. We will take him back after a while. Fu Jianxiu. All the tenderness in this life was given to Zhang Xiao. Zhang Xiao sobbed lightly and looked at Fu Jianxiu with wet eyes. Will Uncle Wu really come back? Well, he will come back. Not only will he come back, he will also come back with his younger brothers and sisters. Fu Jianxiu told Zhang Xiao with certainty. Zhang Xiao nodded believingly. Uncle Wu, he's back, he's back. Zhang Xiao stayed in Fu Jianxiu's ward for a long time. After her mood stabilized, she fell asleep on the bed next to Fu Jianxiu's bed. Fu Jianxiu looked at her tear-stained face, his eyebrows depressed. Guanyang came in, covered Zhang Xiaoxi with a quilt, and gave him his cell phone. Boss, second brother's phone number. Fu Jianxiu took over the computer. And Nangxuan was at Fu's branch. Boss, Zhou Yuling's company is now in the hands of Moz Yuan. Do you want to take action against Moz Yuan? Yeah, Fu Jianxiu hummed lightly. I know. And Nangxuan hung up the phone, and Luo Yi just arrived at the branch and handed all the information to Nangxuan. Moz Yuan's wishful thinking is loud and clear. He wants to take advantage of that woman Zhou Yuling. It seems that your IQ is too low. Guanyang put the potion into the infusion tube. Fu Jianxiu frowned and did not discuss this topic. Have you found your childhood psychiatrist? On the way here, he is my college classmate. The next day. Weibo hot search exploded this time. Hashtag Moz Yuan was arrested. Hashtag Moz Yuan is suspected of economic crimes and murder cases. Hashtag Moore's group changes legal person. Hashtag When Mo Zhangxiang received the call from his master Luo Yi, he had already rushed to Moz to stabilize the mood of shareholders and stabilize the overall situation. Sure enough, when the stock market opened, Mo's stock price fell to the bottom. Uncle G, I believe I can stabilize the overall situation, so you don't need to panic. I am working on several big projects in cooperation with Mr. Fu. Zhangxiang, I know you are fighting with Moz Yuan, but you can't make fun of the company. The company cannot withstand such a blow. Ji Xia touched his bald head, with a sad look on his face. Uncle Ji, if Moz Yuan is really my father-killing enemy, then I will never let him go. I don't know about him being taken away. Mo Zhangxiang looked at Ji Xia with a serious face. Do you dare to say you don't know? Ji Xia didn't believe what she said. Uncle Ji, even if I had to deal with Moz Yuan, I would drive him away in the right way. But as you see, if he had not been arrested on suspicion of economic crimes and murder, even if I had the ability, I would not be able to do anything to him. He was charged with such a crime. Mo Zhangxiang looked at Ji Xia forcefully. If you want us to support you, it depends on whether the stock market will recover in a few days. If you can't save Moz, then we will not support you, Ji Xia said forcefully. Mo Zhangxiang looked at Ji Xia. The person who had always supported him suddenly stopped supporting him. This change was really strange. Uncle Ji, what do you mean? The leader of the Mo family can only be those who have the ability. It does not mean that if your surname is Mo, we will support you unconditionally. What we see is who can bring us great benefits. Ji Xia's face changed completely. End of this chapter.